Have you ever read about an issue, go down a rabbit hole to dig out more information about it, and realize that there is conflicting information? You then realize that you spent your whole day reading and watching videos about this particular topic, and by the end of the day, you still don't know what to think about it. Or maybe you know different languages, and you realize that different sources are framing the same events in completely different ways. In the end, it just seems like the more you dig, the harder it is to get to the truth. If that sounds like you, then this video is for you, because you are one of those people who care about staying informed and seeking the truth, but maybe you just haven't figured out a way to not burn yourself out throughout the process of doing so. Because nowadays, everything we see can be so polarizing. That person used to be me, and I would also have wasted my whole day feeling anxious because I'm literally being consumed by everything I see online. As someone who has access to information from all over the world due to the internet and can speak multiple languages, meaning I have access to different information ecosystems, contrary to popular belief, I don't always feel empowered by the resources and tools that are available to me. In fact, often I feel disappointed in myself. And so I thought a lot about why the act of trying to stay informed made me so burnt out. I've come to the conclusion that it's because thinking critically is extremely difficult in today's world due to the sheer amount of misinformation and sensationalized headlines that we are bombarded with every day. Because there's no barrier to publishing anything online. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying just because you burn out after reading the news or whatever, you don't have critical thinking skills. I'm saying the opposite. You're burning out because you're trying to do so much critical thinking, but you haven't found a sustainable way to do it. So in this video, I'm going to share the exact framework and habits that I have developed and am still trying to develop so that I can become a better critical thinker in today's world without going insane in the process. I want to make it clear to you that critical thinking, that is, the ability to objectively analyze information, evaluate evidence, and form a well-reasoned judgment, is not something that only smart people do, whatever that even means. I see critical thinking as a skill that anyone can gain if they're intentional about it. But before I dive into the solution, let's first understand what are the actual problems. So go ahead and grab a cup of coffee or tea because I'm going to get very real in this video. Okay, so the first major problem that we have is that the sheer amount of information that we're getting due to the internet age makes it a real chore to determine what's real and what's fake. So what do I mean by that exactly? With access to the internet, we thought what we'd be getting is unlimited knowledge, the ability to learn everything and anything at the tip of our fingers. And while that may be true to a certain extent, for example, I actually learned how to dance through online tutorials. And I don't think previous generations could have done that. And I also learned so many things through YouTube. But the constant flow of information means that there's both good information and bad information. So when I say bad information, I mean things like theories disguised as facts, or sensationalized headlines that don't actually align with the content for the sake of earning more money. So basically any information that is hurtful or potentially hurtful but is disguised to be helpful. On top of that, of course, I can't speak for everyone, but I think trust in institutions is really low right now. We just don't know who to trust, like the media, the government, the experts. In fact, there are even signs that shows that references to studies cannot even be fully trusted anymore. And even the studies themselves. A simple example that I can give is that a study could have a really small sample size. For example, let's just say that the sample size is 30 people. And the headlines will then reference that study as if it's conclusive. There's also a replication crisis going on, meaning many famous studies in psychology, social sciences, and medicine cannot be replicated. Think about that for a second. Why is this a problem? Because if your study's findings are truly reliable, that means if somebody were to replicate your study, they will get the same results. So when we say a study cannot be replicated, what it really means is that any other researcher who used the same methods that you used did not reach the same conclusion as you. Therefore, something was unreliable about your study, whether it's because of a flawed methodology or something else. So think about it. Even a reference to a study, and even the studies themselves cannot be fully trusted without an evaluation nowadays. What is even left? I don't know about you, but I find that extremely exhausting. We are already bombarded with so many information nowadays, and now you're telling me I have to evaluate literally everything that I'm seeing. That's tiring AF. And just to make it clear, I'm not saying that nothing can be trusted. I don't want you to have trust issues. I just think that we need to equip ourselves with some basic strategies so that we can quickly evaluate whether a source is reliable or not. So here are 2 source evaluation red flags to look for. And the reason that I'm only mentioning 2 is because I don't want to overwhelm you with like a list of like techniques and like definitions. I'll actually put a list of techniques that you can use at the end of this video, but for now, just focus on these 2, okay? The first one to look for is publication bias. What this means is that studies with positive or interesting results are way more likely to get published than studies that find nothing. This means that published literature can literally give you a distorted version of reality. Let me give you an example. I'm just making this up, but let's say 10 studies are testing whether coffee causes cancer. 9 of the study finds no effect, but 1 study finds a small correlation. In this case, only that 1 study might get published. And now it just looks like coffee causes cancer when 90% of the evidence says it doesn't. The studies that find nothing are not useless because they're telling us what isn't true, but they're boring so they don't get published. That's publication bias. Now, I don't actually know how often this happens. I don't work in academics, but after reading about this, I can tell you that I am now very skeptical of single studies. So 1 study showing something very exciting isn't enough. We have to look for replication and multiple independent studies reaching the same conclusion. That's why I would be cautious about designing your entire life based on 1 single study. The second thing to look for is emotional manipulation. So think about content that is designed to make you feel angry, make you feel scared, make you feel outraged before you've even had the time to think. When you see a title or a headline that causes you intense emotion, make sure you actually read the full content, not just the headline. Because there are times where the content actually contradicts or is more nuanced than what the headline suggests. When you're emotional, you're less critical. And people who create these type of content are aware of that human psychology. So while you're feeling this intense emotion, they'll use that chance to feed you some evidence that's not real evidence, such as a quotation that's taken out of context or some misleading statistics. But at that moment, you might believe it. For me, when I see something that makes me immediately angry or sad or whatever, I take a pause and slow down before I keep reading or watching. Another thing that's helpful to think about is the intention of the messenger. What kind of incentive do they have, and is there any hidden agenda? And if you are thinking at this point, damn, they should have taught us this in school. Why didn't anyone teach me this? I totally understand your feelings, because the second major problem that I want to talk about is the fact that schools teach you what to think instead of how to think. Let's say you're someone who is smart and educated because you have good grades growing up, or you're college educated. But just because you're smart and educated, that doesn't make you immune from manipulation. It doesn't mean you don't have your own cognitive biases. And in my opinion, it doesn't even mean that you have critical thinking skills. And just because you didn't go to college, it doesn't mean you don't have critical thinking skills. I think we sometimes give too much credit to the level of education someone has or what kind of school a person went to determine how good of a critical thinker they are. If you're one of those people who had a really good teacher growing up, you went to a really good school where they actually emphasize upon the importance of critical thinking skills, good for you. But I think for most people in the world, schools didn't teach them how to think. They just taught them what to think. I think I was definitely one of the lucky ones because in my high school, my teacher did this. He played a video that was formatted like a documentary that claimed that the 1958 FIFA World Cup in Sweden did not take place. After playing the documentary, he then asked us to rate how believable we thought the documentary was on a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being this is very, very reliable and trustworthy and believable. The documentary had a presenter who presented himself as an expert, and he provided evidence throughout the video as to why the World Cup did not take place in Sweden. At that time, when I saw it, I thought it was really suspicious because the so-called evidence that he provided can be easily faked. And some of the reasoning that he was presenting just seemed too far-fetched. And I just didn't trust the presenter. For what reason? I don't remember, but I just didn't trust the messenger. But I do remember rating it a 40 out of 100 in terms of how believable I found it to be. I was really surprised when the people before me, because each of us, we were saying our score out loud, like going across the classroom. The people before me were rating it like 90, 95, 85, like 97, etc. So by the time it was my turn, I said 60 instead of 40. Turns out this documentary was actually a mockumentary, aka a fake documentary. If you're curious, it's called Conspiracy 58. So the FIFA World Cup in Sweden did take place. As you can see, my teacher was trying to teach us how to think critically. But I think what's scary about this experience is that you can see how easy it is just to manipulate a group of high schoolers just because of some made-up evidence and just because the presenter seemed authoritative and presented himself as an expert. On top of that, for me, who thought this documentary was fake AF, I still changed my score and my perception on it because of the bandwagon effect, meaning that I wanted to conform with the group, so I changed my score to be closer to the class average, and I started to doubt myself because my opinion was different from everyone else. So my point is not, oh, I'm like smarter than my classmates because I rated it low. Like, no, I'm sure there were other people who also rated it low. My point is that most schools do not teach stuff like this. And even as someone who went through that, as someone who has literally like 3 degrees and went to good universities, to this day, I still cannot deny that I still have some cognitive biases and mental shortcuts that I take, which hinders my ability to think critically. And I am not a robot, so I'm proud to say that I am still on a journey of trying to not have these biases, because I think most people are not even on this journey and have never even been on this journey. Now, I talked about the bandwagon effect already, which is believing something just because many other people also believe it. So I want to talk about another cognitive bias that I think everyone should know, which is called motivated reasoning. What that means is that we're really good at finding reasons to believe in what we already believe in or what benefits us. We subconsciously work backwards from the conclusion that we already believe in. We think that we're being logical, but really we're just finding logical sounding reasons to support what we already decided what we want to believe. Basically, we're only performing logical reasoning within our own paradigm. A good way to counter that is through epistemic humility. A really fancy way of saying, don't be f***ing arrogant. Be honest about what you actually know versus what you want to believe. When you notice yourself really wanting something to be true, that's when you have to be really cautious. Ask yourself, why do I want this to be true? And try to seek out credible sources that challenges your view, not just ones that confirm it. Okay, now you might be thinking, how exactly do I not get overwhelmed by all of this and implement all of this and not burn out? Here's the general principle that has helped me to stay informed without burning out. You literally just need to remember this one phrase. Pick your battles and evaluate quickly. Okay, let me first break down what I mean by picking your battles. First of all, we have to understand that different people have different levels of tolerance towards online negativity. One person could see sad news in the morning and then move on with their day after drinking a cup of coffee. Another person could see the same sad news in the morning and be consumed by the information they're getting, whether it's because they're empathizing too much with the victims or because they have depression and anxiety already. If you have a high tolerance towards online negativity, sure, go ahead, read a few more articles about it, watch more videos on more topics. But if you have low tolerance towards these type of things, don't try to overwhelm yourself by trying to know everything that's happening in the world, literally. Pick a few battles, a few issues that you care about, and know your limits. Because you have bills to pay and you need to live your life. In the past, I've had days where I'll get headaches and insomnia just because of one news that I read that day. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with me. That just means that I need to learn how to protect my mental peace and not keep on going down a rabbit hole that's making me more and more anxious. Don't feel like you have to fact check everything because that's literally impossible to do. You're not failing at being a critical thinker just because you're not constantly fact checking and evaluating sources. I think that protecting your mental peace is more important than trying to be informed about everything that's happening. And if you want to take a break from the news or social media, by all means, do it. So what do I mean by evaluating quickly? After learning to pick your battles, it's time to learn how to stay sharp without burning out. You don't want a battle to drag out for too long because you have limited time. You want to be able to reach some form of conclusion or some form of an informed opinion, even if you know that they're imperfect. In order to do that, first of all, learn the most common cognitive biases and manipulation tactics. So here's a list that I have compiled here and their definition. Feel free to take a look at them and pause if you want to read the definitions. It's not exhaustive at all, but I think it's a good starting point, and I think that schools should be teaching this if they're not already teaching it. After studying them, you can then start to develop quick evaluation habits. If you identify any red flags in what you're reading or watching, make a note of that. Make a note that what you're seeing is an unreliable source or potentially unreliable. It doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't watch it or read it. It just means that you should be careful with the information that you're getting. Also, use source triangulation for topics that matter to you. That is, look at multiple sources with multiple perspectives before you come up with your own perspective. If you're in a situation where you're only exposed to two very extreme sides, one is black, one is white, a good rule of thumb to have is that the truth is often somewhere like in between. Because the world is not black or white, but the media really likes to paint it so. Why is that? I think that's because a more nuanced take on things would not get as many views and as many clicks. Because when you're being really extreme, you are able to trigger someone's intense emotions more easily. And building content that's more nuanced and that's more in the middle ground requires critical thinking itself, and it requires a lot of time and research, so most people are just not willing to do it. And the reason I said evaluate quickly, emphasizing upon the quickness, is because once you begin to see the biases and notice the red flags, you'll be able to do it quicker and quicker. Of course, at first it might be slow, but the more practice you do, the better it gets, the quicker it gets. And if you learn how to identify sources that are unreliable to you, that will also enable you to detach yourself from basically dangerous situations where you're starting to feel anxious or depressed. You won't start to spiral because you got triggered. And that's why the whole evaluation process will only become quicker. And of course, do this at your own pace, at your own definition of what's quick. So just to summarize, for me, the strategy looks like if I care deeply about a certain topic, I'll take time to triangulate sources on that, but I'll learn to stop when enough is enough. When I see breaking news about something that I cannot control or affect, I might read one article, one source, check if it's reliable, and if it's reliable, I'll just move on. I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. The reason I made this video is because I think it would have helped the past me who was struggling. So I hope that it's helpful to you and offered you some consolidation if you are in the same phase that I was in, where you're feeling overwhelmed by things that you see online. And one last thing I want to say is that the things that I mentioned today, they're not like a one-time fix. They're more like practices that you can implement as you navigate the digital landscape. Some days you'll do better than others, and that's perfectly normal. Thinking critically isn't about being right all the time. It's about whether you have the willingness to question yourself and knowing how to update your views when you receive new updated information that is reliable. And staying informed is a marathon, not a sprint. If someone's saying that you're ignorant or you're silly for not knowing something, them. Okay, like, you are on your own journey. What everyone says. You need to protect your mental peace before anything. So don't be too harsh on yourself. If you watch this video until the end, you're already killing it. Okay, that's all I have for today. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comment section and let me know if this video was helpful. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!